question. Please explain your view on the United Nations and how it affects U.S. sovereignty and the introduction of international law into our judicial system.
I'm adamantly opposed to the introduction of international law within our judiciary system. One of the things that I would look for in any nominee is their opinion on that subject. The Supreme Court is supposed to interpret the United States Constitution based on what's in the Constitution and, of course, common law, which has survived here in America. And it is not supposed to pull things from international documents or treaties or the like that and any kind of standard internationally. So I will tell you that, number one, if you look at my record when it comes to judicial nominations, when it comes to this area of international influence, you will find someone who was a stalwart, not just supporter, but organizer in making sure Republicans took the responsibility of fighting for conservative judicial nominees seriously, which we had not. I remind everybody, before I came to the United States Senate, the two Supreme Court justices that were confirmed, I think, in 93 and 94, right before the 94 revolution. I became the United States Senator in 1994. And they were Stephen Breyer and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Two of the most liberal justices on the court. They were passed almost unanimously. Breyer was nominated right before the 94 election. He was Ted Kennedy's counsel and had almost no hearings, was rushed through and was approved right before the election. Shocking, right? Shocking that happened and not a single Republican said it. When I came to the Senate, I said, we're not doing that. We're going to take, the left is able to move the needle, not by the American public supporting what they want to do, but by getting justices and judges to reinterpret the Constitution to impose their ideology on America. And we are going to fight against bad judges and justices that Clinton would propose, and do the same thing, fight for good judges and justices that Bush did. And I led that charge in the United States Senate. And so I just share that with you, that I have practical experience in doing so. I'll show you one other area of practical experience. What is the most important branch of government? What's the most important branch of government? Why? Why do you say the Congress? Because it's in the first article of the Constitution. You write a document, what do you put first? The least important thing or the most important thing? The most important thing. Read it. How long is it compared to the other three? By far the longest. Has the most powers enumerated in it. What's the second most important branch of the government? The executive branch. Shorter, more limited powers, focused mostly on national security and treaties. What's the third most important branch of government? The court. Little itty-bitty article. How many courts does the United States Constitution establish? One. Who establishes all the rest? The Congress and the President. What powers does the courts have? Well, it doesn't say much, does it? Right? No, it doesn't say it. No. It doesn't say interpret the Constitution. How did they get that power? They brought it upon themselves in court cases. And Congress and the President deferred. Why did they defer? They deferred. You notice I'm a homeschooling dad, so I just teach you things. So I always say that, yeah, you're the commander-in-chief if you're president, but if you're really a good president, you're the educator-in-chief. Because if you really, you got to trust the American public with information. You got to trust them that if you lay out an issue for them, instead of what this president does, which just pit one group against another in just these horrific, confrontational speeches of his, instead of trying to shine light on them and try to have an intelligent discussion about how to fix things. You may not like ultimately the decisions I make, but you're going to know why I made them. And you're going to know enough to be able to help make that decision too. That's how our republic should work. Okay, back to the court. So you have a situation where the founders in these early court cases deferred. Why? Well, they figured, well, someone has to make this decision and we'll let them do it. But the deal was, we'll give you the opportunity to sort of be the referee, but you got to be a referee. In other words, you have to practice judicial restraint. And when you decide a case, decide it as narrowly as possible, so just to affect the parties and not bring it upon yourself to say, oh, well, we're here discussing this issue. Let me make law here. Okay? And that was the case throughout most of the history of this country. All changed in the last 50 years. And now we see the United States Supreme Court amending the Constitution with regularity. That is beyond their purview. And it is incumbent upon the other branches of government to say, enough. Now, I know this is really controversial stuff, but I will tell you, I've done it. Anybody, I think was mentioned the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act, which I was the author of. I led that fight in the United States Senate for 6 years. Passed, veto, try to override, fail. Passed, veto, try to override, fail. Then it was struck down by the Supreme Court, a state statute. Then Bush gets elected. So I go over to the House of Representatives and talk with some folks in the judiciary over there, and I say, look, let's see if we can put together a bill that tells the Supreme Court they were wrong. The Supreme Court got it wrong on partial birth when they struck it down. And so we put a bill together. The first 2 sections we call findings of fact. It was basically a legal brief telling the court how they messed up on this decision. And we passed it again. And we sent it, and we passed it. Of course, it was litigated, went to the Supreme Court, and guess what happened? They reversed their opinion. Okay? That's how this is supposed to work. You don't sit when they pass the Kelo decision to say that, that the government can condemn private property for commercial use for private enterprise. When they say that, well, then the President, the court, and the Congress come back and say, well, hell no, that's not what it's for. And we're going to pass a bill that says you're wrong. Let's have a fight about these things. Let them know we're not going to sit there and say, you're the most powerful branch of government. We're going to defer to you. Second, we created all these courts, except the Supreme Court. There's one court in particular that's off the tracks, that has decided, I mean, they are overturned on almost every single case that comes before the Supreme Court. And we're not talking about the most conservative Supreme Court in history. And that's, of course, the Ninth Circuit. Some call it the Ninth Circus. What did we do? We abolished the Ninth Circuit. I propose Can we do that? Well, yes, we can. It says in the Constitution, Congress can create courts, Congress can get rid of courts, and guess what? We can get rid of this court, replace it with it's by far the biggest circuit as far as population. Replace it with 2 or 3 different courts, appellate courts, with different judges. We fire all the other judges and replace them with new judges. Can we do that? Yes, we can. Is the president going to be bold in doing that? Yes, he will be criticized. But it will send the right message, which the message is we respect the judiciary as long as they act according to the Constitution, which says their role is limited. So, probably a longer answer than you wanted, but I'll keep my other answer short. Oh, United Nations. I didn't get the United Nations. 10 seconds, promise. I'm not a fan of the United Nations. We should be pulling out of a lot of things that the United Nations does. We should be cutting our fund to the United Nations. Rodney did a big foreign policy speech yesterday, most of which I agreed with. But his feeling on the United Nations was we need to engage and we need to be. No, we don't. It is an organization that does not reflect the interests of our country. It does not reflect the interests of the world community at large. It affects the interests of a bunch of dictators who happen to populate that area.
What is your position on energy policy?
My position on energy policy is America must produce more energy. It is an absolutely vital economic engine. You look at any graph, and you look at the quality of life in a society, and it is commensurate with energy consumption. The less energy consumption, the lower standard of living people have. And so we need to be an energy-producing machine in this country. And we can't. The reason we are not is because of government policy. And this administration has been the most anti-energy in a long, long time. So what do? First, let the market work. What does that mean? Eliminate all subsidies, all tax incentives for wind and solar and ethanol, for oil and gas. Okay, let the market work. Number two, allow for exploration. Make sure that it's done cleanly and safely, but allow for exploration. I will tell you, I only have so much time, so allow for exploration. That means offshore, that means deep water, that means in particular ANWR. Anybody know what's going on with the Alaska pipeline? Raise your hand if you know what's going on with the Alaska pipeline. A few of you folks do. We're going to lose the Alaska pipeline in a few years. Why? Anybody know why? No? No. We're going to lose the Alaska pipeline because, and I didn't know this until I read about this recently. The oils go way up on the north slope of Alaska. Pretty warm up there, huh? Right? It's very cold. So when they put the oil in the pipeline, oil is a heavy, thick fluid. How do they get it through the pipeline? They heat it. Guess what's happening to the oil production in Prudhoe Bay? So guess what's happening to the volume in the pipeline? So guess what's happening to the oil as it travels along the pipeline? It's getting cooler. And it's not flowing. And so as oil production continues to go down, guess what's happening? There's a chance and a risk, and it certainly will happen at some point, that the pipeline will clog. And we're done. If you go up and look at ANWR, how many people have seen pictures of ANWR? Not the stuff that the Sierra Club showed you. The real stuff. What's it look like?
Nothing.
It's a tundra. It's flat. There's no snow-capped mountains. There's no eagles soaring over the Mount McKinley. It is a flat tundra that is frozen 10 months out of the year. When they're proposing drilling in Alaska, how many roads are they going to build? None. Well, how are they going to get to their equipment out there? Anybody know? Ice roads. They wait until it's cold. They build an ice road. They bring the equipment out on this ice road, and of course it's pretty cold there and frozen 10 months out of the year. They build it, put it together during the winter, take all the stuff out, the ice road melts. This is what the environmentalists are all against. I will put on a public campaign. Unfortunately, President Bush, because of where he's from and the business he was in, couldn't do this. I can't. I didn't come from oil money. My grandfather was a coal miner. Okay? So I can go out and talk about the oil industry and what we need to do. That's leadership. That's the kind of leadership we need. And it is vitally important for us if we're going to get this economy going. I can tell you from Pennsylvania, we're drilling 3,000 to 4,000 wells a year in Pennsylvania now for natural gas. And guess what happened to natural gas prices over the last 6 years? $12. Anybody know what it is now? $3.60. Can you imagine $4.25 gasoline to $1.10 if we allow for exploration. That's the answer.
How would you secure the U.S. southern borders, and what would you do to keep them secure?
When I was in the United States Senate, I actually put together a comprehensive border security bill. You can go look at it online. It calls for over 1,000 miles of new fence. It calls for increased border security and training, increased surveillance, call for National Guards to be used when necessary, if necessary. It's a big, comprehensive approach to solving the problem. It's simply a matter of will. We have had 2 presidents, for political reasons, who have chosen not to do what is necessary to construct a barrier and to put the technology and the boots on the ground that's necessary to make sure that the border is secure. You have my firm pledge that we will do that. I'd have to sort of figure out how long, but I can't imagine we couldn't do it within a year or a fraction of a year. to build the kind of fencing and to deploy and train the number of troops that's necessary to get this done. And we will solve a problem that is creating a lot of really unnecessary anxiety and friction in our society. It's one of the things that really just drives me crazy about this president. He's just so anxious to pit people against each other. I mean, this whole immigration issue for him is just politics. How can I get this group of people to vote for me? Right? That's what he's looking at. It's not about fixing the problem. This president had a 60-vote majority in the Senate, a supermajority in the House, and a year and 1 month with a ability to pass any bill he wanted. And he never even proposed an immigration bill. And yet he goes out to El Paso and in front of Hispanic groups and says, oh, Republicans, they're the ones who are the bad guys. They blocked all this stuff. No. You can't, that's just a lie. He didn't want to fix the problem because it's politically better for him not to fix the problem and use this as a wedge issue to keep Latino voters in his camp and call Republicans falsely racist. Well, we will fix this problem. When we do that, then we can have a real discussion about how we're going to solve this problem in this country with respect to the people who are here with the expectation and knowledge it's a finite problem. All right? If we fix it, we are not then open season again for 10 million more people to come into this country because it's not going to happen. Okay? And that means fixing the legal immigration system. Because about half of the people in this country, illegally, are not here because they crossed the border. They're here because they're overstaying their visas. Okay? So it goes beyond defense. We need to fix the legal immigration system in this country to make sure that we have, for example, people who come here on student visas and go to, in Pennsylvania, Carnegie Mellon University and get some of the best engineering degrees in the world in cybersecurity, and they're going to China, back to China to work. I want them staying here. Okay? I don't want that technology and knowledge to go back to China because it won't be used to our benefit. So if we're training people here in skills that we need in this country, let's figure out a way to keep them here if they want to stay. Right? So there's a lot of things we need to do to fix this system. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, this card actually says that you do not support them, but I want to ask you because I'm not sure about that. Obviously, presidential candidate Herman Cain has a 999 plan. Do you support it? And if not, what is your plan?
Yeah, I do not support the 999 plan. I think it's a very dangerous idea. Very dangerous. So not just a modestly dangerous idea. A very dangerous idea. Why? Because it gives the federal government another way to take money from it. We're going to give the federal government not just the income tax, not just the corporate tax, but now we're going to give them a national sales tax on top of that? That is a bad idea. Well, someone said, well, but you're cutting the tax rate to 9%. Raise your hand if you think it'll stay there. Raise your hand if you think the national income tax in this country will stay at 9%. So why do you want to give the federal government a chance to now tax you coming and going? Okay? I just think it's a bad idea to do anything to empower the federal government with more resources. And particularly a sales tax and an income tax. I mean, I understand there's some people out there for a national sales tax. I'm happy to have that discussion. But it has to be a replacement for the income tax. And the income tax, and I go farther than that. If we're going to replace it with a national sales tax, we have to repeal the constitutional amendment that allows for the income tax. Because otherwise it'll come back through. So that's why I think Herman's plan sounds nice. My plan, I jokingly yesterday at a speech called it my 000 plan. Because of course when it comes to taxes, 0 is better than 9. But it's really, it's a plan that focuses on the area of our economy that is critical if we are not just going to grow the economy, the private sector economy, but do so in a way, and this is really important, I think Republicans, candidly, are missing the boat when they don't address this issue, that gives the ability of folks who are non-college graduates the ability to rise in society. That's where the stratification is coming, folks. We all know it. How does someone who has got skills and experience without the high-level degrees, how do they come from the bottom quintiles and move up the economic ladder? How did they do it in the past? What was it? What sector of the economy did they work in if they rose? Manufacturing. So guess what my plan focuses on? Guess what? That's right. My plan is 0, 0, 0. Zero out the corporate tax for all manufacturers and processors. No tax. Why? Because we want all of those jobs that went overseas because of the tax burden, 1, the regulatory burden, 2, to come back to this country. Zero out the tax. Take the other zero out the regulations. What do I mean by that? I pledge that every single Obama regulation that costs business more than $100 million a year will be repealed. Every one. We'll repeal them all. Some we can repeal and get rid of and not replace them. Some have to be repealed and replaced depending on what the regulation is. But they will be repealed in a way, as Reagan said, where government will not be on the back of business, will be on the side of business, to make sure that business is walking the correct path, but not burdening business so they can walk and operate their business. The other 0 is the money that comes from offshore operations. You have $1.2 trillion of profits that are sitting in countries all around the world, mostly from manufacturers, who made money there and don't bring it back here. Why? Because they're subject to up to a 35% tax if they do, on what's called repatriation of profits. So what do? We zero it out, and we create a pool of $1 trillion of capital to come back to America to invest in plant equipment. You want to see the engine of American manufacturing ramp up? You want to see folks be able to rise in society again and get those good paying jobs to fill in the middle of America? You want to bridge that wealth gap? Start making stuff here in America and make it in a way that it can be profitable instead of taxing things coming in as the left suggests. Let's create the incentive for people to make it here and create the jobs here in America. And let me add one more thing. Here's the other interesting thing. Herman Cain's plan has 0 chance of passing. I don't know any Republican will vote for it, much less a Democrat that's going to vote for it. Okay? So, my plan, how many people think that in the congressmen and senators from Indiana and Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania and states that make a lot of things are going to vote for this plan? They all will. We'll pass this. It's not just about good ideas. It's about good ideas and getting things done. I've got a track record of having good ideas. Welfare reform, I'll use that as an example. We passed welfare, I was the author of the Welfare Reform Act. I don't know if you knew that. I was the author. I wrote it when I was in the House of Representatives. It was my bill. It was in the contract with America. When I came to the Senate, I managed the bill on the floor of the Senate. Bill Clinton vetoed it twice. Why? Because he didn't want to sign it. Because it ended a federal entitlement to welfare. It put time limits on welfare for people who were receiving the benefit. And it had a work requirement for folks who could work. How do we get them to sign it? Because we went to the American people, made the case, educated them of things they already knew. They knew welfare was a horrible situation that created a dependency culture. It was harming people, creating permanent underclasses in America. And we mobilized them and went to them and talked to them and said, please go out and put the pressure. And Clinton signed it for one reason. He thought he'd lose if he didn't. Okay? I didn't sacrifice principles at all to get that bill passed. We did what was necessary to motivate the people to get it passed. And we made it happen. So I just share that with you. If you're looking for someone who's got a track record, who actually can get things done and can put forth ideas that don't go overreaching, that don't sound great to the Wall Street Journal, that has no chance of getting done in Washington, but who has solid ideas that can, do we do some things on welfare that folks on the right didn't like? Yeah, sure. We increased the amount of daycare. I didn't like that, but you know what? We cut the welfare rolls by 50% in this country. In the state of Wisconsin, it went down 92%. And guess what else happened? Women, this was mostly, obviously, 95% of the people on welfare were women with children, single women with children. They went from 40% employment that had been the case since 1952 when they started tracking it to over 60%. A 50% increase in employment. Unheard of. And poverty rates went down. And even today, there are fewer people on welfare today in the midst of this recession than there were in 1996 in the middle of an economic boom. And what welfare programs are exploding? The ones that we didn't deal with in the welfare reform. Food stamps, highest level ever. So we can fix these problems. By the way, my solution for food stamps is to do exactly what we did with welfare. It will fix the system. It'll save money, and it'll help people ultimately.
Okay. Could you eliminate the federal education department?
Let me just tell you, my answer on that is simply this. That the federal role in education should be for public and for primary and secondary education. The federal government has no real role in primary and secondary education, period. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't have an opinion on what primary and secondary education should look like. I believe that the education system in this country should focus on serving the customer of the education system. Who is the customer of the education system?
The children.
I have a mix. How many people say it's the children? Raise your hand. Okay. How many people say it's the parents? Raise your hand. And the rest of you have no opinion. Okay. The answer is parents. Why? Whose responsibility is it to educate your child? Does that change when they turn 6? No. So, who's the customer of the education system? The person with the responsibility to educate the child. You begin educating your children from the moment you have your child. Some people educate their children in the womb. They read to their children in the womb. Right? But at some point, government has convinced you that at some point, it's no longer your job. In fact, it's not only no longer your job, is that you are an impediment to your child's education. And you need to stay out and let the experts take care of it. How many people think that the educational experience that your children get in the school systems, not just here, but in America, are catered to give your children the precise, customized education that your child needs? Raise your hand. Nobody. Now let's just pause right there. Think about the state of education when you think about that. How many people will go into a store, an Apple store, and walk in there and buy a product if it wasn't something that you thought would be good for you? In other words, how about if the Apple store, instead of you having the money when you walked into the store, that you paid the money to Apple, and then Apple would tell you what product is best for you? Would you get the product you wanted? Maybe. But probably not. That's the education system in this country. It is fundamental, it's foundationally broken. And we're not thinking big enough, folks. I mean, we're trying to do all these charter schools and this. We're not thinking big enough. We have to think about how we can get an education system, and we can do this. How we can get an education system that is structured around engaging parents on a continual basis in designing a curriculum and designing a school experience, whether it's at home, whether it's over the computer, whether it's in a Christian school, whether it's in a public school, whether it's in a different public school, whether it's in a charter school, whether it's a combination of all of those things. Your children deserve, from the billions of dollars we're spending, an education that meets their needs. and your desires. How many people in this room only care in your childhood years, in raising your children? How many people only care about their children's academic achievement? That's all you care about. No. What do we measure when it comes to schools? How do we tell whether school's a good school or not? Academic achievement. Do we measure anything else? Nope. Nope. How much time do your children spend in school versus what they do the rest of the day? The vast majority of their time. Right? Either school or in school-related activities. And we have an institution that in fact specifically doesn't do anything about all the other aspects of your child's life. And in fact works against what many of you would like to see. The spiritual, moral, and character and virtue development of your children. All of which I suspect you would like to see in your children. Right? Why do you put up with this? Why do you put up with this? You're spending billions. And you have politicians who just want to rearrange deck chairs on the Titanic. It's failing. It's not just failing because our children aren't learning. It's failing because our children are being raised in environments that are, at best, amoral. America can't survive. What's the worst subject that children have in school? What's their lowest acumen? History. Everybody talks about math and science. It's history. We don't teach our kids who we are. Why? Well, because then we would have to get into sort of moral things. We have to teach about the Bible. We can't do that. Teach about what the founders believed. Who are they? They're not in the classroom anymore. This is a serious problem. Here's the problem I have. Is the federal government can't change it. What I can do as president is I can get rid of all of the regulations and everything that force schools to do things that the quote experts want them to do out of Washington. We'll get rid of all that stuff. I'll fight tooth and nail. But ultimately, what I'm going to try to do is to do two things. Number one, remove the shackles so the education establishment can, in fact, do what the people who are more closely connected to them want them to. And secondly, I can do something which is very, very important. And something I think, hopefully you see in what I'm all about. When I was a United States Senator, I have a great legislative record. You can go on a National Security, Syria Accountability Act that was on top of Syria before anybody was talking about Syria as a problem for Israel. Worship Iran. The Iran Freedom Support Act, my bill, was talking about the Iranian nuclear program in 2004 when the CIA said it didn't exist. And I had a bill that no one would sponsor, and within 2.5 years, it passed unanimously. Okay? I've got a track record on a lot of things, but you know what I was most proud of, the things that I did in the United States Senate? Is I figured out that one of the things you could do as a senator is the power to convene. To bring people to Washington, to put them in front of a committee, to have hearings and talk about issues that nobody else is talking about. That the press covers because, well, you're a senator. Now imagine a president. How many people in the last couple of weeks have been talking about class warfare in America? Right? Kitchen table conversation. Why? Because the president's talking about it. Now imagine a president who wants to talk about other things. Big things. Important things. Imagine a president who will go up and talk about what schools should be. Have that discussion about breaking some norms and having people and parents understand that we're at a critical time in our country's history. Our republic is at stake if our children don't understand who we are and aren't, as Adam said, inculcated with values because our Constitution is made for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate for the governance of any others. Why? Because if people don't constrain themselves, then government has to get bigger to constrain them. Right? We need to have those discussions. How about having a president of the United States that has 7 children? By the way, everybody know what president? There's only one president in history that had more children in the White House. If I was elected, who was that president? Oh my! I'm just going to say this right out here. I am embarrassed for everybody in this room. I am. I'm going to say that to camera. I'm embarrassed. Fred, the reporter back there, who I'm sure knows the answer to this question. I just want to know, I'm embarrassed. Why am I embarrassed? Because the president was from Texas. That's why I'm embarrassed for the people in this room. Anybody know? I narrowed it. John Tyler is the... so Tyler, but he cheated. Just so you know. At the time he was president, he had 14 children. But he cheated. He had 2 wives. Not at the same time. Not at the same time, but each wife had 7. So on a per capita wife basis, I have the same number of children as John Tyler. So anyway.
There's a high school in town named John Tyler.
Yes.
But I don't think he's from Texas.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. I thought he was. So,
Now I'm embarrassed.
but the bottom line is this. Having a president who can convene. Our little girl's 3 years old. She's a miracle. She's a special needs little girl. The doctors told us 5 days after she was born that she had a condition that they were surprised she was still alive. They told us that she had no life expectancy. None. And they sent us home on hospice care. We went through a very, very difficult time early in her life. She died, coded twice. But she is alive and she is a miracle today. She'll probably never walk or talk. But she does something more important. She loves. She is the center of our family. She puts a smile on my face just now. And she has taught me so much. You know what? Everybody that comes in contact with her, she teaches them too. Having a president that not only talks about the issues that are important, not only tries to propose solutions to our problems, but lives in an example of what is important in life without preaching, just living. That's the opportunity we have. It's the opportunity we have in this election. So I'm here in Texas. I'm out of time. But I wanted to ask for your help and support. We're obviously in a tough race. A lot of folks in the camp, a lot of folks in the back. And I'm certainly not one of the leaders. But we're out there working hard doing just this. In every little town across Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, and now in a few towns in Texas. And if the American public wants whoever New York and Washington and the pundits say should be president, and then go along and do it. But you folks here in America and you folks here in Texas can do something different if you want. You can step up and you can help us. You can help us financially. You can help us in a lot of ways. Through all of the social networking you do, all the Tea Party connections you have. You can be a strong voice for us in having something different than sort of the normal as President of the United States. Hope to think about it.